What's up everybody, it's Matt from Peter Glenn, and in this video we're going to show you the Burton Unidisc, this newer version, and exactly how to mount it and how to adjust your bindings with it. It's pretty genius. Let's check this out. So Burton's always been one of the top companies in the game when it comes to bindings. And then obviously with their bindings, they need to have a lot of adjustability. Burton has always included enough discs that you can pretty much mount the bindings on just about any board. You would have a disc for your 4-hole and you would have a disc for your channel. And then they did still make the 3-hole discs, but those are not included with many of the bindings, mainly just a version of those with the kids bindings because the kids boards are the only boards that still have that 3-hole pattern, but you can still get these. And again, in the past they had this 4-hole disc, and you can see that there's actually 3 different holes, so you can adjust the binding forward and backward. You can go back, center, or forward. Likewise with the channel, you've got 3 different holes, so you can go back, centered, and forward. But with this new disc, we've got a whole new hole pattern that actually does everything that these 2 discs do. So this new Unidisc works pretty much exactly like any of the other discs when it comes to the standard mounting. You basically obviously set it inside the binding, you figure out your stance width, you figure out your angles, but the biggest thing is this actually has the adjustment for your centering. The Burton bindings have a fixed heel loop where the heel loop and the base plate are all one piece, and getting your foot centered up on the board is very, very important. We'll actually leave a link down in the description to a video about centering up your foot, but we do want to make sure that our toes and heels are hanging off the exact same amount, and that's where this comes into play. So when you look at this disc, you'll actually see that there's a set of 4 holes with 2 different spots, and that's for the 4-hole pattern. And then you'll see these bigger holes on the outside, and there's 2 different ones, and that's for the channel. So this is going to be how you're going to center the binding up. So when you drop these things inside the binding, what you're going to do is start at the center mark. So when you look at the disc, you can actually see that next to these sets of holes, there's actually a little groove. And that groove on this 4-hole pattern, that's basically telling you that it's going to be centered. So whether your disc is mounted like this, or if you flip it over and mount it like this, if the screws go into that specific hole where that groove is, that means that the binding is going to be centered up on the board. Likewise, when you're mounting it on the channel, these other 2 holes, same thing. You can see that little groove, and that's basically going to mean that if you mount it there, that the binding is centered up on the board. If you have a little bit bigger foot or a little bit smaller foot, depending on the size of your binding, let's say the binding is an 8 to 11. If you're at an 11, you're going to actually need to drop the binding back a little bit because your boot's going to be a little bit longer. If you are closer to that 9 or 8, you're going to need to move the binding forward to center your foot up. But no matter what, this disc will move forward and backward. The main thing that you just need to realize is that you might have to flip the disc around. So if we start at center and we go ahead and get that thing set in there and line it up with the groove and you put your screws in, we know that the binding is going to be centered up. But let's say we've got a bigger foot and we're on the higher end of the size range, and then what you're going to do is you're actually going to slide the binding back into those holes where there is no groove. Now, if you have a smaller boot and we need to move it forward, the genius thing is all we do is we take this disc, we turn it around 180 degrees, set it back down in there, and now we can actually move the binding forward, again mounting it in that hole where there is no groove. So as you can see, every single stance option that you're ever going to need is included in this one set of discs. So there's a few things that actually makes this really, really cool. Obviously we get all the adjustment we ever need for any channel or 4x4 board. Burton is to use less resources and less time and energy to make multiple discs. There's less discs for you to lose. So if you are planning to keep those around because you might get a board with a different mounting pattern in the future, we don't have to worry about that because they're all right here. And also there's less waste. A lot of times in the past, people would get, again, 1 binding and 1 board, and they would pretty much just have that for a long, long time. And then the other discs, the extra pieces, those just end up being waste. They end up being thrown out and end up in a landfill, and that's something that we don't want to happen. Now, if you do have one of those old boards with the 3-hole pattern, you can still get the 3-hole discs. Burton does still produce them. They don't produce them as much because they're not including them with every binding. But they do have them available, and if you do buy a pair of bindings, basically whatever retailer, whether it's us or somebody else, you can request these discs free of charge, or you can hit up Burton and get them free of charge as well. But for the most part, with all the boards nowadays, with the 4-hole and channel being the standard mounting patterns for pretty much 99.9% of the boards in the market, this is the only disc you're ever gonna need with a Burton ReFlex binding. But if you got any questions beyond what we talked about in the video, definitely leave some comments down below. We're on there every single day trying to answer your questions. We want to make sure we can get you into some rad gear, but most importantly, we want to make sure that we can help you get it mounted up properly as well. Also, make sure to like, subscribe, and definitely get that notification bell on too so you can find out when all the new videos drop. Grab yourself a new pair of Burton ReFlex bindings with that brand new Genius Unidisc. Get it mounted up and get out and ride, because any day riding is a good day riding.